So we're here with Ken from Badger Airbrushes company.
Hey.
So anyway, so you were here this weekend for
Monster Palooza.
And what's that about?
It's a pretty awesome Hollywood special effects show. A lot of airbrush used in the industry of Hollywood and special effects and all the cool stuff that they do. And so we come in town for that. We actually teach classes at that event. We classes Friday and Saturday.
Oh, nice.
And the classes we do are actually on one-to-one scale figure bust that we do, but it gets people oriented to airbrush who might not otherwise have that opportunity, and lets them learn some things that from pros that are in the industry and well recognized and have developed techniques that make doing that type of stuff easy and a little more efficient in what they do. So it's a cool event. They really pack them in. It's over at the Marriott in Burbank, and they get some of the old time B movie stars and stuff like that out there to sign stuff, and people, the kind of people that you look at. I know that person, I just don't know what I know him from. Type actors and stuff. So it was cool. It's a good time.
Cool, awesome. Now for our hobby here, we do little figures and stuff like that. So do you recommend doing like bigger stuff, like the one-on-one stuff, to really practice and hone in on your airbrush techniques?
I think it really depends on what you're interested in. It's. I think that's personal preference. I don't know that a lot of people who are in the horror and fantasy and figure kit genre, are apt to jump in and start doing wargaming figures.
Right.
And at the same time, unless a wargamer has an interest in horror movies and monsters and stuff, they're probably not inclined to be interested in that. But anything you can do to enjoy whatever you're doing, and if airbrush is part of that, to improve your abilities with it and increase your versatility, sure. I mean, painting a one-to-one figure is going to be more similar to a vehicle that you guys might use because it's a little bit larger piece. But even the figure kits and stuff, they come in smaller scales. We just happen to do one-to-one for the class because the company we partner up with, Blackheart Studios, they specialize in one-to-one monster figures. So because of that partnership, that's what we do. That's what we use in the class.
Okay, great. All right, so one of the new products for Badger is the Minatare airbrush paints line, right?
Minatare?
Minatare.
I'm not familiar.
You're not familiar with Minatare?
Yes, Minatare is a new Badger product, and thanks to guys like yourself and Les and Matthew Fontaine who helped us develop that product and make it something that was suitable to the audience for it. It's been an enormous success, almost to the point where it's been too successful. So curse you, WGConsortium.
How can it be too successful?
Well, we're a small family-owned business, and the reception of the Minatare product has been far beyond what we could have anticipated. And so we're in a perpetual catch-up mode right now because it is still a new product. It's in its infancy, and people are still learning about it and seeing it for the first time. And when they see it, and then all of a sudden they start looking around, they find other people who are, fascinated and enjoying using the product. They want to try it, and and there's a flip side of the learning curve where some of the things that we've gone through with other paint products when we introduced it, Model Flex and Freak Flex and Nail Flare and Spectratex and things like that. We've worked through all the things as people learn to use it, our idiosyncrasies of the product that even we need to figure out and become aware of so we can help people more successfully and enjoyably work with the product. We're going through that now with Minatare where, the clear coats may not work the way that their Model Air clear coats work or the metallics may lay on a little bit differently. And, so there's a learning curve on both sides, both from the user and from our side. And so those are some of the things we're finding out. We're fortunate to have a very good and capable chemist who, a lot of times if we're aware of a concern or a problem, something will go off in his head to say, okay, that's probably this. Let's try and address it that way, or tell the end user, try this. So there is a learning curve, I think, with any new product. Everyone's accustomed to what they've been doing, but when they see something new and possibly better and they want to try it and they see the success others are having with it, they want to have that same success. But sometimes you have to be taught, kind of like working in a new baseball mitt type thing. You know,
right.
The old one worked great for you, but that new one, when you get it, you know, it's man, this is great. But you got to get comfortable with it first. You know, the ball will pop out a few times if the mitt's not worked in yet.
Right, because I know that there is a lot of things that some people are running into, which I've never ran into, and I have no idea what they're talking about until, you know, I see it. It's very hard because with so many people using it, everyone has their own, you know, thing with it.
And you know, we've been getting little bits and pieces of that from people. You haven't heard a lot of repetitive problems, but everyone having their own little unique thing. And, you know, that's, I think one of the things that Badger's known for, I hope we're known for, is our care for whoever's using our product. So, you know, as people have those concerns or situations or questions, you know, we hope they're not afraid to approach us and ask, and know that we'll always do our best to help them succeed with our product, because we want them to enjoy using Badger stuff.
Right.
So, you know, so if you got problems with Minatare or concerns or questions, let us know. We'll do our best to make certain we make your usage of our product an enjoyable one. So.
Yes, and we'll plug in all the information where you can get help down at the bottom of the video below.
Cool.
One of the things I always, you know, advise people is like, they're always asking, well, I got the Patriot now. Should I go for the Sotar or should I go with the Chrome or whatever? I always tell them, okay, well, go start with the Patriot, go Chrome, and then Sotar. And then there's all these other utility brushes around, like the 360 and the Anthem, and depending on what you want to do and stuff. What would be your advice? I mean, what would be the actual logical choice of?
Well, you actually, in asking your question, answered your question. Because you said depending on what you want to do. And that's how you choose an airbrush.
Right.
Depending on what you want to do, an airbrush is made to that application, or likely to be made to that application. There's really not a graduated process. You don't start with this one and then this one and then this one. You have your airbrush that's best for base coating. If your budget allows you to have an airbrush that's good for base coating and an airbrush that's good for other things, you get both airbrushes.
Right.
You know, for instance, in your applications, I would tell people the Patriot is a base coat general detail airbrush. Now, in larger scales, I might not say that, because in larger scales, the Patriot, you know, has a downside in that the cup will only hold so much material. For instance, the one-to-one figures we were working with at Monster Palooza. If we had the ability in a classroom environment to use all the most efficient tools, we would add bottom feed airbrushes in there to do all the base coats on these things, because they're larger pieces, and you know, we had to fill the cup numerous times in order to get it done. Now, in your scale, you know, a color cup on top of a Patriot is going to hold more than enough color to base coat a piece. So it's a little bit different in that the applications that you have in your specific usage of the airbrush aren't as vast. You've got your my recommendation generally when we get contacted by a war gamer is your Patriot is your general detail base coat gun, and then your Chrome or Sotar are your finite detail airbrushes. And the difference in those two things and how you would choose it is your feel of the airbrush, because the spray pattern potential of the Chrome and the Sotar are identical.
So they are identical.
They are identical. The needle has the same linear airflow angle in both of them, and the tips have the same aperture in both of them. So they're going to produce the same atomization. The Sotar's a little bit more technical pencil feeling, whereas the Chrome's a little more Mont Blanc pen type feel to it. So,
and that's probably why I always switch to the Sotar when I get really close with stuff, because it has that feel of getting really close to the
absolutely
model, versus the Chrome where it has a longer front end. It's just a little too far for me.
And you know, I think part of that is because the Sotar was developed by illustrators, guys who sit down at a drawing table and do their illustrations, and they're right over top of them, and it's a lot of in-tight nook and cranny painting, whereas the Chrome, which came out of the Velocity from the Renegade, the original Renegade series, was developed by a fine-scale military modeler.
Right.
So he's working in more of a workbench type environment as opposed to a drawing table environment. So that's kind of the difference there. You know, you guys probably work more like illustrators, I would say, simply because of the size of your piece that you're working on. You have to get in tighter on it to do what you want to do, because your whole world is smaller. So,
okay, so if the needle size is the same, what about the trigger? I noticed that the trigger on the Sotar is a little more sensitive Or maybe that's just my imagination.
That's your imagination.
Is it
John.
really?
You have a very active imagination. You want that trigger to feel different, so it feels different. Same trigger linkage and everything in the Sotar.
Maybe I just keep my Sotar cleaner than my chrome.
That very well may be. Shame on you. Your chrome will hold it against you.
Yes, it will. So, okay, so we know that there's, then no actual difference between the Sotar and the chrome other than the feel of it.
The feel is the biggest difference. And the size of the color cup, which, again, goes to the feel. And the trigger's a little bit closer to the color cup on the Sotar.
Okay.
So
that was one of the questions our user submitted in. Now,
thank you for the excellent question, user.
Excellent question. Okay, what's the difference between the Renegade Velocity and the Chrome?
The difference between the Renegade Velocity and the Chrome is that the Renegade series, when it was first developed, it was developed for custom auto painters, guys who do graphics on cars. Okay. And they tend to be very heavy-handed airbrush users. They're guys who shoot spray guns all the time, work in an environment where everything's the old Tim Allen character from the whatever Home Improvement. Yeah. Right. They're those type of guys. So the trigger mechanism on it was more suited to what they did. The guys who worked on that airbrush were more in that field. Mm-hmm. Well, when we came out with that airbrush and people started to use it and talk about it, it came into the fine scale modeling market. Right. And one of the things that we started to hear from the fine scale modeling market is we absolutely love the performance of the airbrush. But man, that trigger is like cumbersome to us because those guys work more like illustrators. Right. They want to control their trigger more than their trigger controls them. Yeah. The automotive painting guy, they want to control their trigger, but they want their trigger to be giving them a little bit of a challenge while they're doing it. So what we did was we worked with a fine-scale military modeler, a gentleman by the name of Cyrus Tan. Very, very talented guy, world-renowned. He actually won the first Tamiya model contest where Tamiya flies you over to Japan and stuff. And he checked out the velocity at an International Plastic Modeler Society convention. And he took the time to tell me, this is really nice. I really like the performance on it, but man, I sure wish that trigger was softer. And I asked Cy if he'd be interested in helping us design something that he thought would be more suitable to fine-scale modelers and how they use airbrushes in the feel they'd like to have for it. And he graciously agreed to help us out with that. And that's where the Chrome came into being. And some of the things that he felt were important was softer trigger. Mm-hmm. So we put the Badger trigger linkage into the Chrome, which the Renegades originally had a Theron Chandler trigger linkage, which is a tensor spring inside of the tube shank, the needle tube mechanism that's there. So that addressed that to soften it up. And at that same time, we had also started to develop with one of our materials finishing companies a material that was designed to take non-mating parts that rub against each other and smooth out and reduce the friction for them. Right. So we actually introduced that on the original Renegade series, and so it was instantaneously available on the Chrome, so that helped as well with it. So we had a softer trigger mechanism, and we had the new finish that we put on the trigger and the rocker lever where they rub against each other to eliminate any friction that's there. And then we took some of the things from the Sotar that Cyrus liked and incorporated that into the Chrome. So it's got that micrometer needle setting on the back, where on the Renegade it just has a needle setting. It doesn't have something that you can hone in on a very precise reference to come back to later. And then we put the finger thumb rest from the Sotar on the gun, and those were the big things. Everything else was pretty minor. It was more to distinguish the Chrome from the balance of the Renegade series. Mm-hmm. So it's chrome plated as opposed to the more platinum looking Renegade series. So the things that are most notable to a user is it's got a softer trigger tension. It's got that finger thumb rest, and the micrometer setting are the three things that are the biggest differences in the Velocity Renegade series versus the Chrome.
Another question that does come up a lot when I'm fielding questions is about the price of the Soltar. Why is it cheaper than the actual chrome if they're the same airbrush?
Well, we'll give some insider trading information to answer that. Seeing we're a privately held company, it's not really insider trader information, so I don't think we can get busted for this. Soltar's unique in its pricing because generally at Badger, our process is what does it cost to make something, and what does it need to be priced at retail-wise to fit into the distribution network properly. And Soltar is one of the few products that doesn't fall under that, because at the time we developed the Soltar, and this goes back about 15 years, the artists that we worked with in developing that product, one of the things they really felt was important was to price that product retail price-wise, equivalent to what they felt it was comparable to. So at that time, the product from another brand that the Soltar was the target for, that these guys were all users of, that product was priced at about $450 to $500. So they felt it would be very difficult to have a product priced at $200 and try to convince people it's the same in its performance capabilities as an airbrush that costs $450 to $500. So we bumped it up more to the $400 price range. Now, what we did do since day one with that is our pricing to the distribution network was not done under a discount structure. Because generally, the way Badger works, we sell to hobby distributors and dealers and stuff like that, and we have a discount structure. So there's a distributor discount and a dealer discount. So obviously, they're buying at a discount, and obviously, when it gets to the end user, they've added everything back in that puts it closer to the manufacturer's suggested retail price. So everyone gets their little piece of the pie. In the case of the Soltar, we net priced it from the get-go, saying that we don't need to make more on this product. We're cool selling the airbrushes the way we've always sold them. So we'll let the dealer, do their pricing levels that they want. And some people don't want to give up that perceived value, and they put it out there at that price. And others like to go the route of MSRP $400, our price $125 or something like that, because they're looking more for the consumer who's going to pay higher attention to price than anything else. And that's the difference between the guy who might shop at the local Walmart or the guy who, might go to the higher end store. So, but there's a place for both of them, and some dealers sell them at $400. They don't sell as many, but they make more money when they sell one.
Yeah.
So,
okay, I guess that works too.
Yeah.
All right, the next thing I want to ask, because this is a real, people get confused about that. They think the smaller the needle size, the more finer line you get. Is that right?
It's right, but that's only part of the equation, okay? Because the other thing that comes into play is the media that you're spraying with it. Okay. Ultimately, with an ultrafine, good example, using the chrome and the Soltars, which, well, let's just go with the chrome because it's ultrafine and fine. Okay. I can get a finer line with the ultrafine. I can get a finer dot pattern with the ultrafine. But because the aperture is smaller than the fine, it's going to be more sensitive to proper paint preparation and stuff like that. Ultimately, the finest line I can produce is using a medium like an ink or a watercolor or a dye through an ultrafine airbrush. It's probably going to go pretty problem-free because you don't have pigmentation to deal with and mess around with in it, and it's going to produce a nice fine line. I can also do that with the acrylics, but because you're talking about pigments, you're talking about a greater potential for clogging. And I think probably most people who are watching this have painted with an airbrush, and they realize when they're using an acrylic, there's a tendency for it to clog. Whether they're using an Iwata airbrush, a Badger airbrush, a Badger airbrush, your medium's going to dictate, what's going to happen at the airbrush. I use this analogy when I try to describe this. If you can envision a room of people and a single door to get in and out of that room and someone yells fire.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, someone yells fire, everyone goes to the door. If it's a single door, a couple people are probably going to get tied up at that doorway. If you have a double door room, people are going to get out a little more fluently.
Right.
So, and there's other things. You can look at pigment sizes as fat people and skinny people. Okay. I'm a big pigment. Other people are smaller pigments
Right.
than me. So if I'm in that room yelling fire, the smaller pigments better hope they get to the door before I do. but the difference there is the difference in a fine art acrylic, something like a Liquitex or a Golden, where it's a finely ground pigment, and a brand that's popular in the game wargaming industry that I just won't use the name of, but it's in every Gamer's Workshop store. Right. That pigment isn't ground as finely; it's more for brush painting.
Right.
Now, people do reduce it and try to spray it, but when you reduce it, you're not shrinking the size of the pigment, so it's still fat guys going out of the airbrush.
I see.
Things like Minatare and Model Air and Liquitex and Golden, those are brands that you do need to thin down in order to spray them. Are the skinny guys that are more suited to being used in an airbrush.
Now, is there a medium or thinner that actually does size down the pigment?
No, because the pigment size is established by how it's grounded into
okay.
pigment. So,
right.
And I couldn't tell you, all the different types of grinding. There's 3 different types of grinding that can be done. The finest is ball grinding, which is what is done with things like Liquitex and Golden acrylics and Minatares and Model Air and stuff like that. I guess another way to look at that, though, is you can make the room bigger, going back to the analogy of the double door, single door, and fat people and skinny people. I imagine if you reduce something enough, you can make that bigger pigment so it'll get to the door in an even stream, but at the same time, you're probably going to lose some surface tension if you go that far with it, an adhesion characteristic that you want to have. So you can't reduce the size of the pigment, but you could probably dilute it further. I think at some point, though, you'd have a problem with how the finish lays onto the model.
So then, the needle size is just half of the battle. The other thing is what you're using.
What you're using in the airbrush and pressures and stuff like that as well. I mean, one of the other things that I always make a point of mentioning is that, when you're using an airbrush, you're drying the paint while you're applying the paint. So, if your pressure isn't right, if it's too high or higher than it needs to be, you're going to dry it faster and you're going to clog a little bit more.
We'll go on to some of the questions that some users submitted.
Cool.
Okay. So first one, why does the Chrome come with an adapter for other airbrush hoses but not the Patriot 105?
Well, if we put the adapter in with the Patriot 105, there'd be another group of people that doesn't have to buy it. The primary reason for that, in all honesty, is when the Chrome came into being, we found an audience with users of a competitive product.
Okay.
And the one thing that several people had expressed to us was, I've heard great things about the Chrome. I'm using brand I airbrush, and I'd really like to try it, but I got all brand I hoses and stuff like that, and I don't have to buy all that stuff. So once we heard that for about the 1,000th time, we said, we should just put the adapter for brand I in with the Chrome airbrush. Now, there's obviously people that are using the other brand in some of their lower, not lower quality, but their lesser precise application airbrushes that are now coming over to Patriots as well. It's one of those things, though it hasn't been as prominently requested of us that would justify us putting that adapter in with the Patriot. But the Chrome, we're still getting a lot of converts coming over, and they really appreciate having that adapter. It's one less thing they need to buy.
Basically, it's a marketing decision on that airbrush.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, originally, if people have the original Chromes, they didn't come with the adapters. That was something that happened after the product was launched, and a lot of people who we call them converts now, that was the reason they were giving, that they haven't gone out and got one and tried it, despite what they were hearing. So, that's the type of thing that I hope we're a company that people know we care about what they tell us. And when we heard that enough times, we said, okay, we need to address this for people. Okay. So if you have an original Chrome without an adapter, we'll send you one.
There you go. Second question. What do you think about the ball-jointed trigger mechanism used by companies like H&S, and will we see something similar in the Badger products in the future? We've
taken a look at what H&S have. They make an excellent product. I mean, that's one of the other things for us, is we do a lot of research of what our competitors are doing, so we're aware of it. If they have design ideas that might be beneficial for us to look at and incorporate, see if we can improve to be even better. We don't copy anybody, but if they have an idea that we can improve on and get into our product, we certainly want to do that, because I think that makes us more attractive to potential users of our product. Right now, there's no plans to do that, the trigger mechanism. We've talked to a lot of people about it, and it's kind of a you love it or hate it thing. Yeah. I think anyone who's been using an airbrush for any great length of time, they want to push down that trigger, and when it doesn't really go down, it feels foreign to them. Yeah. I think part of that, though, is they have that pointed trigger, and when you push down on that thing, you can figure it can get pretty sore, when the trigger's not going down when you're pushing down on it, but you still want to push down on it. But Hodder & Steenbeck has a lot of cool things in their design. I mean, they're a German company, and German engineering and German design is always top-notch. And, I mean, my last name is Schlotfeldt. I'm German. So they are one of the companies that we watch and see what they do and what they got going on, and nothing that we've plan to incorporate into our designs right now, but it doesn't mean later on we might not give it consideration. We're perpetually trying to do new stuff and look at new designs and ideas and stuff like that. So, and I think that's evident in the fact that in the last 5 years through a recession, we've come out with 5 new airbrushes and 2 new lines of paint. So that's a perpetual thing that's never going to change. And, some of doing that right is to take a look at what design ideas are out there, whether they're coming from end users or if they're out there from our competitors.
Okay, so for people that don't know, what exactly is this ball joint mechanism?
Well, it's a mechanism. Most airbrushes are set up so that you push down to actuate your airflow in the airbrush, and you pull the trigger back to make it move. On the Hodder & Steenbeck, it's one motion. It's just you push down. You don't really push down. You more pull back, and as you pull back, that the way that bottom is designed, it pushes down the ball for you as you pull the trigger back. It's kind of hard to explain.
So it's like playing asteroids instead of Pac-Man, in a way.
I couldn't answer that for you. It's been so long since I played asteroids or Pac-Man that I don't remember. I'm trying to think what might be another. It's kind of a good analogy is anyone who's using a pistol grip airbrush. Okay. The Grex or the Iwata pistol grip guns. When you pull that trigger back, there's no pushing down motion like you have on a top trigger airbrush. When you pull that trigger back, you actuate both your airflow and your color flow. At first, as it comes back, it actuates the airflow, and then it hits the angle, and then it starts to open the needle so that the paint comes out. Hodder & Steenbeck's design does that same thing in a top feed airbrush. Now, the interesting thing about that is we actually have a similar design in that the airbrushes that we make for beauty and bakery applications. We actually call them reverse single action, because usually in a single action airbrush, by definition, as most hobbyists know it, that's where you set your spray pattern first, and then you just press your trigger, and the preset amount of color comes out. In the bakery and beauty industry, it's the opposite. We remove the valve spring from the airbrush, so the air is constantly flowing through it. So all the operator does is pulls the trigger back and gets color whenever they pull back on the trigger. They never have to push down. And to someone who's using a Hodder & Steenbeck airbrush, the reverse single action feels very much the same, because when you try to push down, it doesn't go down, because it's already in the down position because the spring's been removed from the airbrush. So all you do is pull back. So I guess inadvertently we do have a similar design. That was never really the intention, and the fact of the matter is, in bakery and beauty, the airflow needs to be continuous to keep the material wet. When they're using it, kind of like a pond, where air keeps that pond there by keeping the air flowing across it.
Okay. I would like to know if there is a smaller tip and needle conversion available for the Patriot 105. I actually wrote a blog entry on that, and it has, 3 kits?
There are 3 needles and nozzles that can be used on the Patriot airbrush. The standard needle nozzle on the Patriot is what we call the detail nozzle. It's a 0.5 setup. The 3 different nozzles, you have super detail, detail, and general purpose. Okay. Now, a lot of people know them as fine, medium, and large. How that happened, I don't know, but I've always titled them super detail, detail, and general purpose. Initially, when the Pro Production Series was introduced, which the Patriot is part of, there was only detail and general purpose.
Oh, okay.
As a lot of people came to us and said, the competitive product in another brand has a smaller nozzle. Are you guys planning to do that? We heard it enough times again that we said, yeah, okay, we should do this. We should come out with the 0.3 nozzle, and that became the super detail.
Now, that's the same conversion kit that you use for the Anthem 155.
Yes, absolutely. The Pro Production Series consists of the Patriot 105, the Anthem 155, the Universal 360, and the 200 NH.
Okay.
So any of those, you can put the super detail, the detail, or the general purpose nozzle on, the 0.3, 0.5, or 0.7. The thing that's important is to know that you need to change the tip, the needle, and the spray regulator.
Yeah.
A lot of people just change the tip and the needle, and then they put the spray regulator on, and it doesn't work properly. And they write us an email how they got a bad, tip and needle or whatever. And but that's something that's usually figured out quite easily and corrected quite quickly.
Okay, and for more information about those conversion kits, I actually have a blog entry on that, so just check out the WGC blog to get more information on that. All right, the next question, how would one acquire potential sponsorship from Badger?
Sponsorship? What's a sponsorship? That's the type of thing that we always welcome inquiries from people about that. That's a budget thing more so than anything else. Badger, like any other company, has budgets that it uses, and part of that budget is a marketing budget, and part of that marketing budget is a sponsorship budget. And if there's funds available to do it, and we can see a return on the investment of allocating that part of the budget to that sponsorship, we're always open to that. I mean, we're business with it. We hate to say no. But at the same time, we have to make certain that where we are saying yes, that it's going to benefit us as well as the person that we're sponsoring. And of course, for us, we do we do sponsorships because you're one of the people we sponsor. Mm-hmm. Les is another person that we sponsor. We sponsor people in the bakery industry and the taxidermy industry. So we are open to that. At the same time, you can't say yes to everybody because I can tell you that we get at least a dozen sponsorship requests every week. And, basically what we do, right now those budgets are pretty tapped for us. And that's primarily because we have a very solid sponsorship relationship in all the categories we want to have that. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean at some point that the person that we're working with and have a relationship in, goalie mask painting isn't going to stop painting goalie mask at some point. And that opens an opportunity for a new relationship with somebody. Hey, you laugh, but we have a relationship with probably one of the most known NHL goalie mask painters.
Really?
Jason Livery from Headstrong Graphics.
Oh, wow, that's really cool.
We're privileged that Jason uses our product. He's used it for 20 years. I've known him since he was a 16-year-old kid, and I was much younger myself. See Jason's stuff, go look at Bill Elliott from the St. Louis Blues goalie mask. That's what he paints. But we're proud to have, the privilege that he chose our product to use. And so when he needs something, we throw something his way because there's a mutual benefit in that for us. Because we can say, look what our stuff does. It does some pretty incredible artwork. He was actually chosen, I used Bill Elliott's mask as a reference, because that was the goalie mask of the year last year in the NHL, and Jay painted it. So I can honestly say that a Badger Airbrush contributed to, the goalie mask of the year last year in the NHL. Because one of the things that Badger contends with is that there's this perception we're a hobby airbrush. And that's not the case. There's little, if anything, you can't do with a Badger that you can't do with other airbrushes that people automatically recognize as high-end airbrushes. And, that's part of what the chrome and the velocity and stuff like that is about, to show people that, we can make .21 airbrushes that'll do hairlines and do, pimples on a gnat's ass or whatever you want to say about it. But, it's people need to open their mind to that possibility, and people like Jason and look what Les does with this stuff. Look what you do with this stuff. I mean, it's incredibly finite detail work. I mean, you know, that's part of the benefit of a sponsorship for us is, you know, people can see what happens with our product, you know, what the capability of the product is through the artists that put it to such excellent use. So
showing off the product, basically.
Yep. So you can always ask. You know, the worst we're going to do is say no, not at this time. But you know, we're not going to say no, get lost.
Right.
We're going to say no. We appreciate your interest, but right now we can't do something. But you know, in the future, if there's that opportunity, we'll keep your information on file. And in the meantime, if there's a way we can help you out, we'll try to do that. So.
Yeah. The only time Ken says get lost is when you ask him for 1,000 chrome needles.
Yeah.
Didn't work. Okay, next question. I got my airbrush a few days ago and I tried it fully out yesterday, but during the painting session, I discovered the needle won't go all the way back. There seemed to be an object inside the nozzle that was stopping it. I cleaned the airbrush, something that seemed to fix the problem, but it happened again 3 times after that. Now, that's a common question. That's why I put it in here, because there's actually a way to fix it. I believe that's the Teflon seal that's causing that, maybe?
Well, yeah, and what that possibly is there's a Teflon seal inside that airbrush that's adjustable, okay? And it is set at the factory because the airbrushes are tested before they leave the building. And, you know, I don't know if it's something related to transit or whatever, you know, because in transit a lot of people don't realize you're talking about brass parts. Brass is a soft material. You have a threaded piece that holds that seal that's screwed into the inside body of the airbrush. And, you know, it is possible that in transit, depending on where it's going, you know, the longer the trip, the more likely there is to be a change. If someone in the testing room is remiss in retracting the needle a little bit before it goes out the door after they've tested it, and that needle and tip are resting against each other, it's not unlikely that either that tip and needle are going to be embedded against each other or that tip might be split. So we have to make certain that we do that. Yeah. When it happens, we almost always know what's happened, what the cause of it is. And I think the same happens a little bit with that screw because it's a very fine screw. It's you actually need an eyeglass screwdriver to get at it and do it. Yeah. And generally, I have sent out quite a few emails lately to people who have indicated my needle gets hung up with it. And we're probably at some point we just need to do a quick YouTube video on how to adjust that seal inside, because generally when you explain to someone how to do it and they do it and they'll email you back, that fixed it, thanks very much.
Right, cool. I know Mario had that problem and Fear GFX had that problem.
And that's the inner seal on the inside. And really what you need to do, you need to take the guts out of the gun in order to access that inner seal inside. Take a small eyeglass screwdriver, get it in the back side. And the adjustment is very slight, maybe a 16th to an 8th turn of it. Slight. And, you know, once you've done that, take the needle, just the needle, rather than putting it all back together, take the needle and put it through. You should feel where you're passing through the seal.
Right.
But it shouldn't be hanging up. You should feel it, but it's still smooth movement. And if it feels too loose, you probably need to turn it back the other way a little bit. If it's not loose enough yet, give it another 16th to 18th turn.
Okay. So, I'll do a video on that later then.
So
pretty easy. Okay. Next question. What would be a good reducer to use with Badger Minatare paints, and how much would you use a 1-to-1 thinning ratio on? Is Liquidex air thinner reducer a better product to use instead of alcohol Windex, and it's really for airbrushing? I don't know why you would thin Minatare. It's already thin.
Well, yeah. I mean, you might thin it for different effects and stuff. Okay. I mean, you know, that's, who knows? That's probably somewhere in some less burstly video somewhere where you thin something to do a wash effect or something like that. And there is a reason to do that every once in a while, depending on what the artist wants to accomplish with it. But if you do want to thin Minatare, water's sufficient to do it. And what I tell people is, if you're going to use all that paint at once, use tap water. If you're going to store that paint after you thin it a little bit, you're only going to use a portion of the paint. Use some distilled water. For it. So now the other part of that question that always troubles me is, first of all, alcohol is not a thinning agent for water-based paint. I know a lot of people do it. There's a lot of information about it, but water-based acrylics, the biggest frustration most people have with them, and I guess advice like this is directed more at the newbie than the aspiring artist. The experienced guy has gone through what he needs to figure out
Right.
what works for him and what doesn't. But I can never make the recommendation to a newbie or an aspiring artist to thin with alcohol. The reason for that is I know one of the biggest concerns with acrylic paints is how quickly they dry and the clogging that causes. You introduce alcohol into it, which dries faster than water, and you've now accelerated that dry time and increased the probability that you're going to clog. So stay away from alcohol. There may come a day and time when you're more experienced and, for whatever reason you want to introduce alcohol because someone told you should and now's the time to try it. I don't think it's ever necessary, but if it works for other people, by all means, have at it. And the other thing is that an ammonia-based cleaner like a Windex is not a thinning agent.
Right.
It's a cleaning agent. We formulated the paint with the ingredients that we think are necessary to make it the paint it's supposed to be for the application. To introduce new ingredients into that formula, I'd never recommend that. Now, water's in the formula. The other thing is extender that we have, which is there's also some of that in the formulation of the paint. So theoretically, extender could be considered a thinning agent because there's no pigment in it.
Right.
So you're actually, when you add extender, you're thinning the paint a little bit because you don't have the pigment-based ratio.
Right.
You just have the thinning agent. But at the same time, you can't really overuse it as a thinner because then your paint's never going to dry.
Okay.
So
I know alcohol sometimes has some weird effects on acrylic paint, like gunking it, making it
that is a big problem. We get a lot of people that clean their airbrush with alcohol.
Yeah.
Why they do that, I don't know. But the problem is, if you don't get everything out, alcohol and water-based paints tend to get pretty gunky.
Yeah.
A lot of times we'll get airbrushes back at the factory, and once we're able to get the needle out, you can see all this gunk buildup that's on there, and right away you're pretty sure what it is.
Yeah.
And it's usually some form of alcohol, water-based paint mix that's just gunked onto the needle. So, alcohol and water-based paints are not compatible.
Right. So the next question is, I have a Renegade Velocity and I love it, and if I choose to add to my collection, which additionally includes a very old Pache early 90s bottom feed, what would you suggest? I would assume that it would be good to get an updated bottom feed airbrush. So would the Rage be best, or is there something more versatile that you suggest in your line?
Well, if there's any Badger airbrush you don't have, you should have it to have a full collection.
I agree. I agree.
So start there, and basically, we're going to start putting them in Happy Meals, so you can collect them that way too.
Oh, there you go.
But no, it really depends on what the airbrushes you have already aren't doing for you.
Right.
Okay, sometimes I understand people buy airbrushes just to buy airbrushes, and God bless you for doing that, but I'm also the type of person that, I do believe you can have airbrushes you don't need. Right. I know that probably sounds absurd. Here's the president of Badger Airbrush Company say, I can have airbrushes I don't need, but the reality of it is, if the airbrushes you have aren't doing something that you want to do, there's probably an airbrush that will do it. That's the airbrush to get.
Yeah,
if you want to, complete the range of what airbrushes can do for you. If the airbrushes you have are doing everything you need, then, buy more paint or buy more models. Use your money in a manner that's going to be more enjoyable for you rather than buying an airbrush that you're not likely to put to a lot of use because it didn't really add anything to, to what you needed. The gentleman says he's got an old Pache bottom feed, so it's probably a VL. Which is an excellent gun for doing a lot of base coating and larger stuff like that. He's got a Renegade Velocity, which is a good detail gun, a good finite detail gun. If there's something in there that's not being accomplished, I would say that taking into account those ends of the spectrum that he has, the old Pache and the Renegade Velocity, there's probably in the middle there a gravity feed general detail airbrush that would be useful to him. Especially if he's working on minis, simply because of the fact that although the Pache is an excellent base coating airbrush, a bottom feed airbrush for miniatures is that's a lot of airbrush. I mean, and you have to spray that bottom feed airbrush at 20-25 psi. So just to get the mini in a stationary position while you're painting it is a little bit of a difficulty. So my recommendation is possibly look at a Patriot or the Eclipse gravity feed gun or something like that. Look harder at the Patriot than the Eclipse gravity feed gun, but even the Talon is another airbrush. That would be the only thing I would see in there that possibly he could improve, what the airbrush is able to do for him.
Next question, could I bring a Badger airbrush to the Badger facility for factory labor repairs?
Yes, absolutely. People do that all the time.
Okay, great. That was easy. Now, one of the things is...
No, don't come to our building.
You psycho.
We won't be there.
You can't come in. All right, one of the things is distribution. I mean, people are still, like, trying to get the Minatares, especially internationally, right? So they're asking, like, I don't know. I don't want to read this whole thing off because...
let's read it off.
You want to read it off? All right.
Are you guys... This is Chung's script.
This is not a script. This is the question they sent in.
Okay. This is your script.
There you go.
Okay.
Your script.
Are you guys ramping up production of the paint range to handle demand? When will distribution of the set for the entire range be allowed to stores like Amazon? Yes, we are ramping up production of the paint range as best we can. In all honesty, we are beyond capacity right now, but we're trying to increase capacity. We're waiting for some filling equipment to arrive that will help facilitate that.
Open extra rooms in the factory.
Yeah, we've actually added 3 people in our paint room, but until the new equipment gets in, there's not much we can do that. We're not the only one with long lead times. The paint filling people have long equipment. People have long lead times as well. But we actually have made several shipments to Amazon. It's a matter of how quick they're getting it out once they have it. Amazon is sending us orders weekly because people continue to order weekly. So, it's a perpetual situation. We're making some progress on it, not the amount of progress we'd like to. Because, a lot of people say it's a good problem to, have orders. And there's no such thing as a good problem.
Right.
But we're making some progress in it, and we're hopeful in the relatively near future we can keep up with the demand for the product in a little bit better fashion than we've been able to so far. But again, we started out this interview and I mentioned that the Minatare demand far exceeded what we would have anticipated, and that's probably the fault of guys like you and Les and Hugo and all those good people out there who have done the favor for us of reviewing the product and talking about it, and so
where is the scapegoat?
So it's all
anything
it's all
that
your
happens,
fault.
It's all our fault.
Absolutely.
He blames me. He calls me up and shouts at me, and
of course you guys are coming in for Adepticon next week, and we do expect you to spend a couple days at the factory filling paint.
Oh yeah, that's
while
right.
You're there. You made the problem. You can participate in solving the problem.
That's why. I didn't want to fly Hugo.
We'll get that on YouTube.
There you go. Hours of us just filling paint. By the way, they are in Amazon, and Amazon have been shipping them out on the back orders. I've been getting reports in from the community about that. And
Amazon wants us to be caught up too, and we want to be caught up. We're not intentionally withholding product. And we'll do our best. Stick with us. You'll get your paint. You'll be glad. I have yet to have someone tell me it wasn't worth the wait. So.
Okay. Ken, I was wondering if you have any shops in EU, Norway, that sells your paints and or airbrushes.
Norway specifically, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what shops have it because we sell to a distributor. The distributor there is Tiller.
In Norway?
In Norway.
Okay.
Yeah, we ship to them. They then distribute to hobby shops. So we don't know the hobby shops. Right. We know the distributor. The best resource for Badger product in Europe, we always encourage people to stay within their own country,
right? Because
that helps us in the relationships we have with those distributors. But www.intl-trade.eu is one company that we can confidently send people to. They carry everything that we have. As soon as we introduce something, they place an order for it. We know they have Minatare. We know they have chromes. it's that's our most reliable distributor. We have other good distributors in various countries, but the consumers don't necessarily have access to them. They can't order through the distributor, but they can contact the distributor to find out what dealers might have something that someone's looking for. If you go to our website, I think there's some information on it, probably not overly up to date because we're working on a new website right now and haven't done much to update the old one. But internationaltrade.eu is a good resource. If you're in the UK, Barwell Body Works .co.uk also does a pretty good job with a lot of the specialty products and stuff that people are looking for.
Okay. Next question. What I'd like to know if there is an ETA on the Minatare paints that will be available in Europe. We already asked that, right? Tried a few months ago, but the only place they sell are U.S. and the new USPS prices are too expensive.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what country that person is from, again, I would tell you Europe in general, www.internationaltrade.eu, international abbreviated INTL.
Okay.
And if you're in the UK, Barwell Body Works is the best place for Minatare right now.
Okay. So. The next one is finding parts. The same thing, except he's trying to find parts and for his airbrush, and he's in Canada. So he says that Michael's a little too expensive, and then ordering one part from Win-Win is a little expensive. What is there any other place to get parts?
Hey there, Hoser. It's one of those situations that there's not much we can do with that. You're in a place. I mean, we do love every dealer to sell everything that the consumer needs.
Right.
But to get a brick and mortar dealer in this day and age to be efficient in handling, parts that they might only sell one of every 6 months, to that dealer, that's dollar bills tied up in inventory that, unfortunately with the economic conditions over the last few years, it's difficult for that dealer to do that.
Right.
So the consumer is forced to, head to the internet to make their purchases. And, the Canadian internet sellers, as far as Badger goes, there's not really one I can think of off the top of my head who, does much to support the product line. And that forces the people in Canada to come to the U.S. Win-Win we trust because of the fact we know that they have everything that we need. Coast Airbrush is another good resource online that we highly recommend if you need to get something. If they don't have it, they'll make certain it's on the next order that they have coming from Badger. But unfortunately, that's the price for living in Canada as it comes to Badger Airbrush. And I don't know that problem is exclusive to us. I wish I had a better answer and remedy for it, but until we do, they kind of have to keep, spending a little bit more money to get it. And I guess the one recommendation I would make to someone in that position is have some foresight. If you do have to order a tip or needle, have some foresight into things you might also need somewhere down the line and get those at the same time so you can amortize that shipping cost over several items and be a little bit proficient in your purchase.
Right, paint, lube, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and what about Australia?
Australia has been a real conundrum for us because actually Australia, I should clarify that, Australia is getting better, especially for you war gamers, because we have two people in Australia who we know have either product in stock or on their way to it. ModFX is one of them, and Defiant Gaming is another one off the top of my head. That has been the one neat thing about Minatare is that it has opened some new distribution channels for us, only because as dealers like ModFX and Defiant Gaming came to us, we didn't really have a place to send them to get products, so we handled it directly with them. So you do have a couple resources there that if they don't have the product yet, they will have the product soon. In Australia, we do have other distributors in Australia, Southern Airbrush Supply and Airbrush Focus is another. They tend to be more in the fine art, custom auto category, but they do have products. We're not going to have anything Minatare related, but those are some of the resources that you have there. So.
Okay. Great. And I think that's it. Is there anything else you
That's
want to
it?
talk about? Yeah.
So we can go to brunch now?
Yeah, we're going to brunch.
Cool.
All right. So thank you guys for joining us, and that's it for Ask Ken. And maybe we'll do it again next year and probably answer the same questions that
We could do it next week at Adepticon.
We could. If we really wanted to. That's it, guys. Thank you for watching, and remember, sub if you haven't, and favorite if you love me, and all that jazz. And
Cool.
yeah, talk to you guys later.